Welcome to Lexington Remembers, one of our many programs. Before we start though, I would like to acknowledge the people on this committee. I know you will see their names later on in this program, but without the people on this committee, we would not be able to do what we have done. So those people are Bob Edwards, Francine Edwards, Dan Fenn, Beverly Kelly, Julie Miller, Diane Sparendio, and Jackie Ward. So you know this is the group that works on this program and comes up with the ideas of who to have and so forth. So without them, we wouldn't have this series of programs.
Very good.
Now, to talk about you. You grew up here in Lexington.
Yes, I did.
And what made you think you would like to go in and become a policeman? When did you get that little idea in your head?
I'm not sure it was that I knew I wanted to be a police officer, but when I was in high school, I developed a sense that I wanted to be involved in some sort of public service. I was going through some of my memorabilia earlier today, and there was a newspaper clipping from 1969. I led a walkout, myself and two other guys, from Lexington High School because there was a lack of communication. There was tension between some of the Metco kids and some of the local kids. And we had 125 kids walk up and visit with Rudolph Fobert up at the superintendent's office. And I felt like we actually accomplished something. We were able to open doors, we were able to generate conversations and dialogue that had not been going on relative to race relations. So I felt that that was kind of like a catalyst, if you will, that kind of drove me towards public service. I've always been a person who wanted to be helpful, help people solve their problems. And I think that this job, this platform has been able to give me that kind of opportunity.
And you aimed for being a policeman. Did you think then that that's what you would want, or might it have been something else?
Yeah, I became aware of the co-op program. Lexington worked in partnership with Northeastern University back in the late 60s and into the early 70s. So that when I had an idea in my senior year of what I actually wanted to do, I applied for Northeastern, was accepted to the criminal justice program, and applied for the cadet job in Lexington and started working as a police cadet in June of 1970. So that was kind of the starting point.
As a cadet?
As a cadet.
What were the responsibilities of a cadet? And do they still have them today?
Well, they've evolved over the years. We've in 1970, when I started, much of what we did was actively patrolling with a patrol officer. We engaged in traffic direction and control up in the center of town. We did some filing. We took care of parking meter maintenance, vehicle maintenance, washed the cruises. We were kind of the Radar O'Reilly of the police department, so to speak. If it had to be done and there was no one else available, send him. But it was a good program. As we got older and as we turned 21, we were sworn in as special police officers, and we were armed and got to participate a little more actively in policing the community. But that was a 5-year program. Upon graduation in 1975, myself and several of my other classmates began working full-time.
Working full-time as a full-time police officer. You talk about being a police officer. I'm not sure. How does the rankings go? I mean, a captain, a whatever.
That's a good question.
Many. I mean,
there's
the hierarchy of the police department.
The rank structure is patrol officer, sergeant, lieutenant, captain, and then chief. Built within that, there are detectives. So you could be a detective as a patrol officer. You could be a sergeant detective. You could be a lieutenant detective. Cadets are kind of outside of that normal chain of command. But historically, it's been that grouping of patrol officer to chief. All of us are police officers. We all carry the same authority under the law. It's just in terms of supervisory responsibilities, who has what level of responsibility.
Now, as you move from one position to another, do you have to pass a test, or is it the chief that decides that you will move up the ladder, or how does that work? You know,
It's a little bit confusing, but we have open and competitive exams. So you have to take a test, you have to pass the test, and you have to score high enough to be reached. If for instance, we had one sergeant's position right now, and 15 people took the exam, only the top 3 candidates would receive an interview. And any of those top 3 candidates could be appointed based upon their work history, their performance evaluations, and other work-related issues, lack of disciplinary action.
I see. And who grades you, per se?
The testing historically has been through civil service, which is the state managed bureaucracy, for lack of a better term. But we've started to evolve away from that, and we're now operating under the authority of civil service and conducting our own promotional exams. The last sergeant's exam we hired a private consultant to come in and build a written exam. And then we did assessment centers where we actually put each of the 13 candidates through a series of 5 exercises where they engaged in role play, and they worked through these problems, were evaluated by the consultant, and a score was provided to them.
Well, that's quite detailed, isn't it?
It is.
It really is.
But it provides you with a much better candidate. Over the years, we've had candidates who could score very well on a written test, but really didn't have the wherewithal to operate effectively on the street. And then we've had candidates who operated really well on the street who didn't do well on just the strict multiple choice test. So this is a good balance. It demonstrates academic capacity, but it also measures the person's real ability to interact with others and to engage in creative problem solving.
Very interesting. So it's quite detailed.
It is. It's a lot more complicated than most people think.
Right. Could you just tell me, list the ranks, I mean the names, what you do, how you move up, like a sergeant or whatever? I mean, what?
Okay. Generally speaking, entry level is a patrol officer.
Okay.
We do have people who work at other levels like cadets and dispatch staff, but that's not necessarily a prerequisite to becoming a patrol officer. So patrol officer is the first step. The next step is a sergeant. A sergeant is the backbone of supervision. They're the men and women who are on the street supervising the day-to-day activities of the patrol officers. They're responding to critical incidents. They're making sure that patrol officers are responding in accordance with policy and procedure, with state and U.S. law, and under the guise of constitutional law as well. They're conducting performance evaluations on the men and women who they're responsible for, and they basically have more contact with the patrol officers than any other supervisor. The next rank is a lieutenant, and a lieutenant is a shift supervisor. We have 3 night shifts, 1 day shift, each represented by a lieutenant. We also have the detective bureau, which is kind of a standalone division that's managed by a lieutenant as well. The next step is captain, and the captains have duties that are split. I hold the rank of captain, and my duties are administrative. I take care of liaison between the various collective bargaining units. I do all of the contractual interpretation in terms of how we interact with people, how we manage time, grant leave, benefits. My responsibilities include maintaining the police manual. Right now we are going through a review. We completed our manual. We did a complete rewrite last year when we went for certification for the mass accreditation process. And we're in the process of doing an annual review of all of our policies to make sure that they are still current and valid. My counterpart, the other captain, is in charge of the operations component. His responsibilities lie with the actual day-to-day operation of the organization, maintaining the documentation of their activities, the arrests, the crash reports, the responses to individual homes, and that day-to-day activity that the police officers do out in the community. Lastly, we have the chief, and the chief is the boss.
The boss.
And the chief has ultimate responsibility for all of the things that I just described, because the buck stops at his desk. But his duties primarily revolve around maintaining budget, and basically supervising the two captains.
It's quite an organization, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, it is. It's
How many people fall under the heading of police department? How many employees do you have in the police department?
Well, we have 49 full-time sworn officers. We have 9 civilian dispatchers. We have 2 police cadets. We have 4 office help, administrative secretary who's like a confidential employee for the chief, traffic manager, and 2 clerical. We have Jim Cataldo, our parking enforcement officer.
Yes.
Bill Ahern.
Yes, we know him.
Yeah, everybody knows Jimmy. Bill Ahern is our mechanic. We have 16 crossing guards, and we have 7 parking lot attendants that we are responsible for.
Wow. So you've got quite a large department.
I think it's 94 people altogether. I don't know what the full-time equivalent is, but 94 individuals.
All right, with all of those people and so forth, and what goes on during a day, what is the, what do I want to say, the most common call that you get, or where you're needed?
Oh boy.
I mean, what goes wrong that
Everything
you need
goes
to
wrong.
straighten up?
Everything goes wrong. Murphy's Law applies. If a typical day, a typical day shift, 8-hour block of time, could involve a domestic dispute, 15 or 20 motor vehicle stops and citations issued, 5 or 6 house alarms, 2 or 3 car crashes, reports of suspicious people, you name it. We do checks on people, suspicious people. We do welfare checks on people who seem to be at risk in the community.
Mm-hmm.
That's a typical day. I mean, but it varies. There's no 2 days alike. It's like looking at a different TV show every time you come to work, because the players are different, the people you engage are different, the people that we run into on the street are different. So there's no real continuity. The only thing that we can guarantee is that it will be different from the day before.
That's right. What do you have for, all right, I know you have the cruisers, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm interested in, what is that big block, if you're on Mass Avenue and you look at the police station, off to the right?
Trailer.
A trailer. What is in that?
We used that trailer to store, up until recently, a motorcycle. We had a motorcycle unit that we used for traffic enforcement, for parades, escorts. We've just suspended the use of the motorcycle temporarily, but we don't.
Why is that? Why is it?
Well, with the weather, it's
yeah.
inappropriate to
Right,
operate. But we want to be able to staff it and staff it appropriately. And we've lost a few people to reassignment who had been trained, so it didn't make sense to maintain it with the very few people that we had trained to operate it. It becomes a cost-effective issue. But it's the trailer itself is a valuable tool because we have a limited space. The building was built in 1955. It was updated in 1970, 71, that 2-year period. When I first started, the police department used basement level and the first floor level, and inspectional services, the veterans agent, and a whole bunch of other folks were on the top floor. Our top floor right now is administrative and detectives, evidence room, but we don't have an awful lot of storage space. So right now, we've got tires and barricades and cones and some of the other auxiliary equipment that we don't have a place to store in the building in that trailer.
Oh, I see. All right. You must have a place where you can practice using a gun,
Yes,
and where is that, or aren't you?
that's public information. We use we have an area at the Harvard Lab landfill.
Oh, okay.
Where over the years DPW has created an embankment that surrounds on 3 sides. And we use that, generally speaking, twice a year for qualification. We do a springtime qualification in May, which is state mandated. All of the weaponry that our officers are issued or authorized to carry, they're required to qualify with those weapons. So the weapon, they'll qualify with their sidearms, with a long gun, and with a less lethal shotgun.
Now, wait a minute. You lost me there. The types of guns. Which ones?
Okay, sidearms are the handguns that they carry on a day-to-day basis.
Okay.
A long gun is a rifle,
Okay.
and the shotgun is it's a shotgun. It's been converted to use less lethal. The only thing that we fire from our shotguns are bean bags. They're a Kevlar sock with pellets in it, and when it's discharged, it'll knock somebody on their fanny, but it's not likely to kill them. And there are situations where you've got someone who may want to harm themselves.
Oh, I see.
You could use that weapon to disarm them. It's just one more tool in the bag of tools that we have available to us. The other, I just wanted to finish up on that range. We go up, because most of our officers work at night, we also do a firearms training program in the fall, where we go up to the landfill and we actually engage in nighttime firing. I subscribe, and the agency subscribes to the theory that there are a lot of low-frequency incidents that are very high risk, the use of firearm being one of them. So you need to make sure that you practice with them as much as possible, so that, God forbid, you do have to use a firearm, you use it correctly. So we get all of our officers up to the landfill every fall, and we go through a whole series of exercises that our range officer sets up so that people are proficient firing their weapons at nighttime. And sometimes it's absolutely black, and sometimes it's just the roof lights of a cruiser that are going, and sometimes it's with the aid of a flashlight, but a lot of different scenarios.
Very interesting, very interesting. What I think I'm impressed with the Lexington Police Department is how you deal with teenagers. I mean, if they have problems, and they all do, we all do.
Absolutely.
And that's what's impressed me.
So in the late 80s, I had the opportunity to be appointed the crime prevention and safety officer, and my primary role was to liaison with, at the time, Assistant Principal Larry Robinson. And although we had some natural obstacles because of the level of suspicion between the police and academic about motivation, we soon learned that the kids who were at risk and acting up in school were the same kids that we were dealing with in the evenings and on weekends. And we figured that if we partnered and we shared information, we could help identify these kids and do some early intervention. That program evolved into the DARE program. That program evolved into our current school resource officer program. And I think that we've been very successful in keeping an officer in the school, identifying that community of interest, that school community of interest, as being the primary responsibility for that police officer.
Excuse me for interrupting, is that police officer there at the high school all the time, or?
Well, yes and no. There's office space available at the high school, but the SRO is oftentimes called upon to go to the Clark or the Diamond School. There are times when there's work at the elementary schools that need to be done, but he's also over at Minuteman Tech. He's reaching out to Christian Academy and some of the other private schools in town.
That's a good plan, I think, really. It's helpful. I mean,
It really is. Well, it gives a sense of ownership to the officer. The officer, it's like if theoretically, if the same police officer is patrolling the same neighborhood all the time, he or she takes a vested interest in the folks who live there and looks out for them better. It's the same idea with a school resource officer. That's the school resource officer's geographical and demographics in terms of policing. He's responsible for that group safety. And when you narrow it down and you put it that way, there's a real buy-in. And there are real partnerships that are established as a result.
I would think so, yes, the partnership between the students and the police officer.
And the staff.
And the staff, yes.
I mean, you got to remember that the school department is probably one of the largest employers in town. And they bring issues into the schools just like the kids do, just like the parents do. So it's multifaceted relationships that we're trying to develop here.
Excellent. Sounds
It's good stuff.
good stuff. What is it that you like best about your job?
I don't know. I like so much about what I do. I've been doing it for a long time. I've been very fortunate to be with the Lexington Police Department for 43 plus years.
No, don't tell me it's that long.
Yeah, I'm sorry, it is. It'll be
I'm sorry.
44 years in June. But every day is a challenge. Every day is another adventure. And although I'm not in the field anymore, I still have challenges and I still have learning that takes place every day. Some of the most gratifying is when I'm standing in Walgreens on a day off and somebody taps me on the shoulder and they say, "Are you Joe O'Leary?" And I go, "Oh, why do I know this person? What are they going to spring on me?" And I'm a little bit apprehensive. And they said, "You probably don't remember me, but 15 years ago," and this is a true story, 15 years ago you found me behind some business. And I had been drinking, I was 17 years old, and you picked me up, put me in the cruiser, and brought me home, knocked on the door, and you said, "Hey, this is your problem, take care of it, have a conversation before I have to deal with it." And my father and I got along great after that, and I never had any other problems, and I want to thank you. It's that kind of encounter that makes it all worthwhile, when you can have that kind of an impact on somebody's life. So that's where I get my job satisfaction from.
I would think so. That is very nice. I mean, that's nice to hear, and to think that the youth can look up to you. I have the idea that sometimes they think, "Oh well,
And
the police are our enemy" or whatever.
Well,
Do you know what I mean?
when this guy was 17, he probably didn't look up to me. But now that he was close to 40, it was a little bit different perspective.
Yes, but you gave him the opportunity to
That's right.
do that.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it so nice.
Well, when
That's-
people say thank you, it means a lot. It means a lot.
Yes. And I know another thing that the police department does. You accompany the ambulance when it goes to places to
Yep.
pick up people and so forth.
We're out in the community. We have 4, 5, or 6 cruisers working on any given shift. We're equipped with basic first aid kits and defibrillators. Oftentimes the cruiser will be in a neighborhood and be in a position to respond to a medical emergency before the fire truck, before the ambulance can get there. So we'll go in, we'll do what we need to do, and then as the next higher medical authority comes in, we back off a little bit, work with them as a team, and do whatever we need to do to help in that particular mission.
What do you think the general public should know about, if you were to make a presentation, let's say a town meeting or something, what the police department needs, what we need to improve, whatever? What might you suggest? I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with the police department, but what would make it even better?
Well, I think it is good. I think that we need to challenge one another to do better on a daily basis. The worst thing that can happen to a police officer is to become complacent. So it's not something that town meeting can give us in terms of resources, but in terms of the way we do business, we need to be motivated, and we need to motivate the men and women who work in that building on a day-to-day basis. We need to treat everybody in the building with the same level of dignity and respect. People's position in the organization is irrelevant. You sit down and you have a conversation and you treat people cordially. If you identify an employee who is having a tough time, find out what's causing the problem. Refer them to an EAP, do what needs to be done, but I think motivating people and keeping an eye on people and caring about the people in the building is probably the most important thing that we can do. There's an old saying, you can't be a good caretaker unless you take care of yourself. As caretakers of the community, we really need to take care of ourselves, and we need to monitor the welfare and the well-being of every man and woman who works in that building.
That's wonderful. That is.
But it's true, I'd say, and it's no different than any other organization, whether it be the schools or the fire department or any other place. If you have high expectations, you need to make sure that you're taking care of those people, because they all go through the same stresses that every member of the community goes through. And
right.
Good days, bad days, we understand that, but we want people to have more good days than bad.
Well, I think you do that, and I think you do it very well. I mean, don't you have a sense that the community itself, Lexington itself, appreciates
Absolutely.
what you do?
We just did we're in the process of doing a citizen survey.
Okay.
And one of the things we try and do is to develop feedback in terms of how are we doing. What do you believe the organization has been doing well? What do you think the organization has been not doing well? Where can we make improvements? And consistently they tell us we're doing a good job. The first citizen survey that we engaged in was probably in the early 90s. And that message is consistent. I think as the demographics of the community changes, we need to reach out to those different groups of people, overcome some of the cultural stereotypes, and work with people to make sure that we act as an individual community. I got to tell you, I hate the word diversity because divide is the root of that word. I like the word community, and I like to be able to identify those common interests. Whoever moves to Lexington wants to be able to live in a safe and healthy environment, and to make sure that their families are in a safe and healthy environment. So I think that if we can focus on that, we focus on the things that we all have in common, we're going to do a lot better than if we focus on the things that make us all different. It would be very easy to get cynical, because you see a lot of things that people don't see on a day-to-day basis that we encounter, and you really have to fight it. But people just want to be treated with respect. It doesn't matter who you are or where you come from. People want to be treated with respect. And I think a lot of people are under the misconception that we're all about law and order, and that's really not what our role is. That's about 5 or 6% of what we do, but 90 to 95% of what we do is a caretaker role. We take care of people. We're checking on their well-being. We maintain an at-risk list at the station where we identify kids and adults with varying levels of disability who may be at risk if they get out of a home. We're one of the few social service agencies that can respond at 2 o'clock in the morning to a mental health crisis in the community. So I like to think of us as being more of a caretaker than an enforcer, and I think that most people understand that that's what we do. Well, there's a little bit of the TV type stuff, but a lot of it is caretaker.
What a wonderful message to the people of Lexington and to people how to understand. I think people don't think of what you're doing. Do you know what I mean? And who you are. And I think that this is coming through in this interview with you.
Oh, thank you.
Really, I think it's well worthwhile. So thank you. Do you have anything else that you'd like to add? What do you, if you were to send a message to the people of Lexington?
I think that the only message that I would send out is that we really do care. We care about what goes on in the community. We care about people, generally speaking. We hate it when people get hurt. There's nothing worse than going to a car accident and seeing all kinds of serious injuries, and then going home and trying to leave it. We tend to wear it on our sleeve. I think if there was a final message that I had for the citizens of Lexington, it would be that we care about what goes on in the community. We care about the people who live in the community, and we want it to be a safe and healthy environment. We want to focus on those things that we all have in common, and we want it to be a nice place to live.
Well, I thank you very much, and I know that the people, the residents of Lexington and other people will enjoy your presentation.
Well, thank you very much.
You have my greatest respect.
And you have mine.
Thank you. Thank you.